So my background, like I said, I'm not tied to any particular companies. Right now, I am helping as many companies as I possibly can to try to get through the 2020 pandemic. I spent 25 years at Target Corporation, from store operations through merchandising, inventory control, crisis management, business continuity, experiential events. I spent quite a few years there, supply chain and automation as well. The really broad breadth of knowledge that I'm bringing to our conversation today, and I really do want to have a conversation. Currently, for the last few years, doing retail consulting, really supporting new retail concepts, e-commerce development, project management. Like I mentioned, throughout 2020 was trying to help retailers try to figure out how to get through this, where to put tape on the floor to make sure that we got our customers were safe and secure, our teams were safe and secure as well. So how did this conversation happen for me to be on Retail Innovation Week? Well, it started with a conversation. So has this happened to you? You make a list of items that you need at the store, you go there, and two of the items on your entire list were out of stock. So you had to exit and go to another store. Frustration for all of us, right? You check online, you check on the app, and they have 12 units on hand. And then you walk into the store, there's no inventory on the shelf. And so what do? Most of us, we'll find an employee to ask for help. The employee says, "Oh, we never trust that number on the app. It's never right. Let me go run in the back and check for you." And so they disappear into this magical swinging door into the back house or the back room, and then you wait and you wait and you wait some more, and you're just wondering, did they forget about you? Did they go on break? And finally they appear. They come back and say, I looked around, I didn't find anything back there. How about this? Just go online and order it. They'll ship it to you. It'll be there in a couple of days. The most frustrating piece of it happened several times to some friends of ours as well as us. So walking into a store, you show them the app. It says, "Nope, you have the 12 units right here." And they say, "You know what? It's just easier. Just go online and ship it." And as retailers, as coming from this side of it, as UX, as we saw many of the people here, you understand really quickly that no, that is not what we want to do. We want to support our local retail. We want to be a part of it. And so that was the frustration part that really drove into this conversation today about operational resilience and how do you look at that? How do you account for that? So take a piece of paper, pen, think about this, what you have right there on, in front of you. Question for you is, what is your inventory in stock number? When you walk into a store, what kind of in stock do you think that store is? Some call it they're out of stock. In fact, why don't you go ahead and drop that into the chat, what you think a company's in stock number is. It could be your company. It could be a company. If you don't sell a particular product, think of one that you really go into. Think of a grocery store. Think of a Barnes and Noble, a bookstore, anybody that has a lot of SKUs. What do you think their inventory percent is? Some call it their out of stock percent. What you see right now on average, retailers are showing that it's about 88 to 92% accurate. How frustrating is this? Out of 100 items you go into a store, 8 to 12 will be missing. They'll be off that shelf. I put a photo here. This is one that was actually taken at a retailer on a Saturday, and you can see didn't get much of my shopping list accomplished that day. So it's really frustrating to the consumer when not only the digital data isn't correct, but it doesn't align with the physical data that you have in your building. And so what does that do? How does that impact that consumer? So what 2020 happened to bring upon us, COVID, we all know about this, and many retailers shut their doors. they had to scramble. And so what we saw, some articles out there identifying that what we saw in 2020 for technology development is a 2 to 4 year plan that was spun around in 3 months of getting it up and activated. How did businesses do it? You know, they duct taped it, they piecemealed it together. There's a lot of technology out there, a lot of SaaS companies, a lot of companies that will certainly help you with deploying technology into the building. Really what you have to look at is how does it connect with the rest of the enterprise, the rest of your systems? Does the data clean from one point to another, or is it just a point in time piece of data? So what are experts saying? You know, shuttered stores, as I mentioned, they tried to stand something up quick. They stood up a BOPIS. They stood up a curbside, a delivery system with open source apps that were out there. You know, Target, the Walmarts, the big retailers that were able to stay open, they put a lot of focus on their curbside, their BOPIS, the processes that they've been working on for years. The data shows that, you know, they're absolutely were light years ahead of where the industry was heading. You know, Target, some of the experts were saying, you know, Target same day, which include curbside and BOPIS, are up 273%. 49% of BOPIS customers bought additional items when picking up orders. You know, that's a big piece of it. Getting a online order, again, it has to match your data for inventory. When your teams are fighting to pick inventory that was purchased on an app for coming into your buildings, as well as you got the consumer that's right there in your building right there. And so they're fighting for that inventory. But when a BOPIS customer, you know, buy online, pick up in store, they came in and they bought additional items when picking up that order. I'm right there with it. How many times you walk in, here's my order's done, you walk in, it's like, you know what, I'm gonna go grab 2 more things, which makes sense. US retailers increased digital revenue by 29% compared to the 20% without a online or BOPIS piece of it. Really it's about the convenience. 2020 was about safety, and it really was the only option for many retailers to stay open during 2020. But one of the biggest things to note for BOPIS is the cost. Let's be real about this. Is even though the fighting for inventory, the data integrity is off. You know, Target CEO has noted in an interview that filling an online order from a store decreases about 40% of the cost. This was across the industry when I was looking at costs for BOPIS. What's really a standout to this is if a customer picks up an online order or uses Shipt, about 90% of that cost goes away. When you look at the average cost of shipping an item, anywhere from $5 to $8 on average, that's huge for a company. Then you think about the increase of that order, the returns, the costs, the negative margin. And then this week, I think we've seen a few articles that are out there of the Amazons, the bigger retailers that are saying, you know what, hang on to that item. It costs us a lot more to process it. Now, there are also a lot of companies out there that have stood up throughout this pandemic that are saying, you know, we'll process your orders of returns, how to do that. They'll take them all. Kohl's, you know, the partnership with Amazon, taking the Amazon orders into return partnership there. It gets people into the Kohl's. You can debate that all you want of what kind of traffic that's driving for them. But it's returns are a big piece of what's happening for the industry right now of getting freight back into the retailer's hands. So really what I want to talk about today was the life of an item. You know, it's important for BOPIS, again, buy online, pick up in store, curbside, and customer, that the app usage be beneficial to that customer. Real-time inventory needs to be available for both the customers and the employees that are filling that order. As I talked about earlier, they're both fighting for that same inventory. If the real-time inventory for some retailers is a snapshot at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then at 5 o'clock at night, a lot of inventory movement happens between that time. A lot of great companies out there. Actually, there's some are speaking right now that are working on how to maintain that data integrity in the store. There's RFID. There's a lot of technology out there that Amazon's using, the cartless shopping, etc. that can find that solution for you. Get a lot of input from the teams that are impacted to gain that best result. And by that, I mean not just working in your silo of a UX piece of it, or working within just a merchant side or a supply chain side. Make sure you're taking not only the vertical conversations, but the horizontal conversations across your entire audience. And the audience is within your company, right? The communication, the web of communication is much stronger if everyone's talking together. When you start dropping out people in that conversation, something will get dropped down further down the line, which then will impact your out of stocks. So as we're going to talk about the life of an item from after a merchant makes a decision on what they want to bring in, and note that when you're having these conversations, every 3% increase in forecast accuracy increases your profit margin by 2%. And so we were talking about that out of stock. Forecast accuracy is a big piece of that. All right, so life of the item, right? You have your merchants and buyers determine what their assortment's going to be. They do their mock-ups, they have their line reviews, and they say, perfect, I want to go with this particular item. Now, this is an extremely basic flow of the supply chain, and some of us saw this back in schools, but really it really gets the point across right now that it's the data integrity points that can be a break within your entire process that ultimately are creating a bad experience for your customer. So your raw materials. Now, raw materials, if you take a look at what's happening right now, example with Clorox industry, with all of their wipes, take a look at the wipe industry. I'm not calling it Clorox, but the wipe industry. The fabric that's used in a wipe, the sanitizing wipe, is the same fabric that's used in masks. So you can imagine right there on the top of the pyramid, the raw materials is a big piece of the issue. Materials are easier to come by. They could be man-made, or they could be manufactured in a factory. Using the GS1 standards of traceability is the foundation starting point. And Auburn University, they have an RFID lab, and they're proving the capabilities that with blockchain, and they can provide the raw material source code all the way to the end retailer. There was some open source code consent source that was partnered with Cargill and Target, and Target released that basically the code on the Hyperledger Fabric using the IBM platform. And what they really wanted to do was create a open platform of determining how do you certify a supplier from the raw material all the way to the end user. It's an interesting read if you're out there for that. So one of the pieces that I ran into on this was it was a project for natural disasters. We were working on hurricanes. We were working on it's actually a Y2K project as well, way back in the day. And this one really stuck in my head because it was about canned vegetables. And when I was presented to the supplier saying, here's what we wanted to bring in, what they came back to me and they said, this is the growing capacity for 2 years of farmers because of the weather that they've experienced. And this is no different than every single year when you hear about the frosts, you hear about the weather, the rain, the flooding for the corn. Just because you want it doesn't mean that it could be man-made or even grown in a field in time for that. So raw materials is a place where you start. Next, we got the supplier, right? That's the conduit between the factory and the retailer. They're the ones that are going to make those connections. They're the ones that are going to be able to put that inventory on a container to ship to the U.S. If you're working with overseas vendors. This was one that I was working on where the supplier was the same as the factory. And I was buying semi-loads of ice and working directly with the supplier who's working with the factory to freeze the water, right? Doesn't have to be super complicated, but it needs to be thought through in where can breakdowns happen when you're trying to speed up the entire process. And is also as well for the consumer at the end. The factory. So this is where when you look out there and you say, where can a lot of the data integrity issues happen? This is certainly one place that you want to look at. It's the factory, it's the manufacturer that coordinate the packaging, they coordinate the tagging, the boxing, they're getting the product ready for shipments. They're also responsible for testing. They're responsible for the quality control. And this is a key piece when you're looking at recalls for items, that this is a critical piece. And now if you're going back to that raw material, you're going to be able to track down completely where the supply chain broke down, if there is a quality control issue, or you can actually contact consumers directly based on that particular lot number of that raw material. So that's a really important piece of that quality control. Now, if you're an RFID, using that as a retailer, this is the optimal stage where you want to apply those tags that can be encoded, that you can continue to track from the factory back through the supply chain into your stores. Now, a big piece about the factory and looking at that 2020 was, you'll hear about it in supply chain. It was a bullwhip effect of inventory, where we had a small little impact of a forecast up here on the retailer side, and what that did to the entire forecast throughout the entire industry. We had containers that stopped moving coming out of China. That created a huge glut of containers that weren't moving. And now we're hearing about that on the apparel, the excess inventory. What do retailers do with that for this past year? But something when you're looking at a potential delay in your inventory that will impact your out of stocks. Simple thing of Chinese New Year, or Spring Festival is called. This year it happens to be February 11th through the 26th, and so early December was the last order that you could place to a factory in China that will get worked on and shipped prior to the Chinese New Year or Spring Festival. The new orders don't happen again until early March. So when you are doing your planning and you want to avoid those out of stocks or new sets, something certainly that you want to continue to look for. Or if you're working with a new app development, or you're working within supply chain or your IT teams, and you want to launch something prior to a new set, make sure that you're taking those partners with your merchants. Make sure you're taking partners with your merchandising teams to find that timing of when to launch that out there. Because if inventory is not available and you launch this great product, things are not going to mesh, or an app or something that will show inventory levels for your consumer. Let me check the chat here. All right, we're good. All right, continuing on from the factory. Now we're getting into the distribution. This is where it gets really spreading out here. Is a multitude of flow models that compared to that simple diagram shown earlier. This is our distribution for warehousing, from shipping from the factory, and then also getting into our fulfillment centers. Take in consideration the timeline that you're shipping from a factory overseas, that it will take a shipment from China on the water about 6 to 8 weeks. It's something that you need to take into consideration when you're building out your supply plan. There are 360 ports in the U.S., and there are 2 that do 1/4 of all container movement in the U.S., and that's the LA port. And in 2020, they did about 8.3 million containers, and that was down 3% to the prior year. And you can imagine majority of that was backlogged, and still is backlogged in that port. Long Beach is the second one. They did 7.3, and those numbers are through November of 2020. Now, once the containers are on the water, they arrive, they get processed at the port. Now, here's where they get transferred to regional distribution centers, fulfillment centers, third-party fulfillers, marketplaces. That's where it really spreads out. And the process to that can take some time. As we've all heard throughout 2020, that carriers, domestic carriers, semi-trucks, really were essential workers. They moved those containers from the ports through the entire U.S., getting them to each of these distribution centers and supply chains. Amazon has 110 different distribution centers. Walmart has 150 plus. Target has 43. So when the inventory arrives to the port, that's where it's dispersed out, going to each of those distribution centers. From there, it's a variety of process on what's handled. a Walmart, a Target, that inventory can flow through, which means that container gets to the distribution center and that carton is automatically assigned and it flows to a store. That's a push type of model. In Amazon, that inventory gets broke down, gets processed, and put into a distribution or pick center or fulfillment center where that can be processed for all the orders coming in. This process of moving freight through the supply chain, it depends if you have a distribution center, which means inventory is going to flow through, or it's a warehouse. Is it going to go there and sit, waiting for that store to have a need or call that inventory into the building? Again, another big point of where that data integrity can really fall apart is at that distribution center. Retailers, here's when they get that inventory, right? A retailer, they get their inventory, their semi-trailers of freight. If they're a CVS, a Walgreens, they're going to come in these shipper boxes that are miscellaneous products within that crate. A full trailer of carton loads for a retailer, you're looking anywhere from 1,500 cartons to 2,500 cartons, depending on what's in that load, what has been sent to the store, and how frequently. Higher volume stores get single, double, triple trailers during the holiday timeframe. Smaller volume stores are going to see 1 to 3, maybe 5 trucks a week. When the store gets that inventory, what they're going to do is they're going to process it. They're going to take the carton off the trailer. They're usually going to scan it with a Telson machine, and some type of scan gun, doesn't matter the brand on it, that will input here's our inventory. We're taking it into the store. Here's where it's going to be placed on a shelf. So they scan each box. Once that inventory is unloaded, they scan the box, and they have a team that's going to send that to the sales floor, or they're going to backstock it. Again, this is a critical piece for that data integrity. If an inventory is not scanned when it comes off the truck, it may not be counted into that store inventory. So now you have an overage. If they send it to the sales floor and the team member, the employee doesn't put that inventory on the right shelf, on the right shelf label, there's a lot of store processes that can really impact the data integrity as well, causing out of stocks, causing and actually an overage of inventory. When store members go through and they're updating their counts, they're looking for inventory, or if they go through the store and actually order themselves at the store level to pull that inventory to them. If it's not located in the right location, if it's not, if the shelf tag is incorrect that matches the item tag, the item may show that it's a particular black long sleeve shirt. But if that tag from the factory back in the beginning puts it on there as a green shirt, the inventory at that store is now a green shirt instead of a black shirt. The store needs to make that updated, that process. And think if you place an order online, it says you have 12 on hand, you go into the building and they don't have anything. That's a certain cause to that. Now that final customer purchase, it's the guest goes online, the customer goes online, they order by e-commerce shipments, the BOPIS, as we discussed before, in the traditional brick and mortar. Still, the numbers are high. It's 90+% of sales are happening out of brick and mortar stores, 2020 with exception. The inventory for the data integrity needs to be connected throughout your entire omni-channel network in order to have that flawless, that seamless customer experience. Results for 2020, they're showing it's a MasterCard spending pulse report, which they put their updates out pretty frequently at the end of each month. Retail stores showed about a 3% increase for 2020 on of transactions. That's cash, that's credit. Online, 49%. Right. I mean, the shift was certainly there, increased to of what happened in 2020. You need to have that entire omni-channel flow of inventory. Now, so where does it get lost? Data integrity. I gave you a lot of examples throughout that entire supply chain where data integrity gets lost. the integrity of that inventory, the factory, if they apply that wrong tag, if they're putting the wrong inventory in that shipping box, that can get, that's their first place of inventory breakdown. The distribution, did the incorrect EDI transmission come through, right? With the GS1 standards, a lot of that is becoming obsolete now. Or I should say much more data strong for having a correct EDI or data transmission. The manifest of the container, did they fill it out incorrectly? A lot of the shipping industry this year, they had quite a struggle. And talking with some individuals there, they were muscling through a lot of that inventory. They had no different than any other industry. They had their computer technology malware hit their industry as well. So that can also impact your distribution or the data integrity at the retailer. We talked about store processes. There's so many there. The wrong shelf, the updating the counts. We didn't talk about the most obvious one, which is theft. And then the customer. Are we perfect? No. Do we put the items on the right shelf after we take it off? No. So we're relying on a store employee to rezone that store to get it looking proper, putting the right inventory at the right label. You're seeing technology now trying to go in the stores and get deployed to try to make up that data integrity, loss of data integrity, we'll call it, right? You've seen the robots in the stores. They're scanning the shelves, looking for out of stocks. They're looking for the right shelf label to the right package, using a lot of AI technology to try to garner not only that sale for the store, but also the inventory levels for the retailer as well, and the customer, to make sure that you are having a clear omni-channel. There's a question out there of, as a retailer, how can we ensure a stable supply chain? Great question. Your supply chain, it's going to take a lot of IT support to it, but think of the basics to it. If you're trying to fulfill out of a store, you are fulfilling out of a fulfillment center, you are shipping it directly from a warehouse. There is a lot that can be impacted there. Looking at I'm not going to call it a particular vendor. There's a lot of strong software out there, vendors that will certainly be able to provide that end-to-end view, right? It's a 360 view of the entire inventory. That'll provide that real time, and I think that's the largest piece to that. Going back to that, what's that impact to the customer? We've talked about that a lot right now, about what that impact is. The impact is the customer has, it's an 88 to 92% in stock rate, right? It's deteriorating your brand, not only your brand, but the item that's on that shelf. It's deteriorating theirs. How many articles have you read about cleaning supplies out of stock throughout the pandemic? I think as consumers, we can give leeway, we can give that flexibility to that. And 30% of consumers will look for a substitute. They'll try to find something else on the shelf if you don't have that particular item. But the unfortunate piece is 70% leave to find the item somewhere else, and they will certainly leave. And as I had to, either you want to or you just need to, because they don't have that substitute item that is specific to that. It's the driving around. But what I've learned is I can't rely on the data that's provided on the digital devices that's out there. The quality of item, the quality of data, the reliability of that data. So the customer, what do they trust right now? All right, it's the service. Do you have employees in your building that are helping the customer find what they need? Are they efficient when they do it? Is there contactless payment? We didn't even veer off into all of those other pieces of how to make that customer experience a flawless one. But if you are a retailer and you're just dropping out technology to keep up with things in 2020, I think there's a lot of leeway that the customer is willing to give. Take a look at this next year, where's the IT going to be spent? Is it going to be spent cleaning up that data? We'll be coming through year-end inventory counts. How are you going to maintain that throughout the rest of the year is the challenge that was going to be out there. So how does your role support that customer relationship? Ask it. Out of all the pieces that you do, is the role in the customer. And we saw a lot of, when I'm looking back through the positions, we saw UX, design, a lot of design pieces, the director of analytics, data. Patrick, data is your lifeblood. Garbage in, garbage out. And I think that's a big piece of it. How do you make the right decisions when your data is incorrect? And what can you do as a member of your organization to look crosswise, to look horizontal, to create that web of communication throughout your entire organization that makes it stronger as a whole, versus working in one particular vertical to launch that app that looks really good if there's no connection upstream. All right, so 2021, Retail Innovation Week. So I gotta throw some future trends that I see out there as well, and I see Chris Walton and Ann Mazanga are on this particular chat as well. And if you haven't checked it out, OmniTalk, they have a tremendous blog, podcast. They're out there pushing the content into the industry, keeping everybody updated on what's hot and what's coming at you. But here are my future innovation weeks out there on future trends. I think you're going to see a lot of the 360 degree of inventory. We talked about that, right? It's the 360 inventory view, looking all the way down from the top down, deployment of blockchain, looking at the GS1 industry standards that are out there, making sure that your company is following that. It's the 3D and 2D barcodes, the QR codes. It's going to get that entire 360 inventory view. I think it's going back to that basics, looking at that. RFID, I think, will become a bigger focus as we're seeing the ones that have deployed it in previous years. That's certainly going to come back and used as use cases to bring RFID to that next level as well. All right, our next one is going to be it's that distributed order management. It's that true omni-channel platform, right? It's looking at that real-time inventory visibility. Again, I'm not going to name out vendors, but if you go out there and look at that distributed order management, a great OSM platform to find that true omni-channel platform, that is what's going to bring the entire guest experience, the customer experience, in a real strong method that will win not only this year, but for many years going forward. So that's all I have prepared for operational resilience. I really do thank everybody for jumping in. And really what I'm asking for really is just take a look at, and we'll jump out of the chat in a second, is taking a look at connecting with me on LinkedIn. That would be a super win. Like I said, I'm not connected to a company that is going to be pushing their product, so I certainly appreciate that. A question out there is, what's one change you've seen retailers taking to adapt their supply chain to become nimble, hedge against the next global interruption? Oh, great question, Rob. In the business continuity world, what you do is you plan for 80% of the issues that could be out there. So you always have that high risk of what is something that's going to be something that you can plan for a very short period of time, but a pandemic, right? I think the supply chain, what we talked about here, is that 360 view. I think you're going to see safety stock being discussed a lot more. You're going to start seeing a diversity of suppliers, of factories being used to bring in your inventory as well, versus relying on a single source. And I think that is what's going to help spread out the product. But again, you have to look back at quality, making sure that you're getting that as well. But becoming a much more resilient issue of global interruption, right? I think it's inevitable. It's going to happen again. And I think we've learned a lot. I think Zoom, there's a perfect one, right, of conversation that we can work from home, and how that's done. So I see diversity of vendors, I think, is going to be a big piece to that supply chain process. Any further questions out there or comments? Think it's on track? Do we think it's... If you want to jump up and have some conversation, you're more than willing to do that as well in the upper right-hand corner. If not, I certainly understand that as well. And I'm looking through the chat here. Bridget, how do I see retailers supporting multiple fulfillment methods in the future? Owned inventory, dropship, etc. Boy, great question. The multiple fulfillment methods in the future, it's going to really go back to having that omni-channel, the view of all the inventory, right? The owned versus dropship. Marketplaces are hot. They will be. They're going to be a growth throughout 21, 22. And I think it's how do you connect those vendors' inventory with yours, even if it's not owned, if it's drop shipped, etc., becoming part of that, a holistic view of that inventory level as well. Great question. I think we have to get back to that basic of seeing the inventory first. What resources would I recommend to stay up on trends with the increasing diversity of vendors? There are quite a few newsletters. RIS is one that I certainly stay on top of. Supply Chain Trends is another one. Having conversations not only with newsletters that are coming out, because that can be dated, data that's a little bit dated, it's a little bit more out there, but having conversations in LinkedIn groups, trying to find out where people are spending their time. Reddit, believe it or not, is where I'm seeing a lot of information for vendors providing information as well. So take that with a grain of salt, that source. But I think it's a place where you can start grabbing content versus just staying out of the newsletter realm, which newsletters certainly provide a great base of content. But I think it's also about taking that and digging a little bit deeper, trying to find more source to that update. Great question, Ann. That's what I was looking for, is resources, and because I am supply, or I get quite a few newsletters that I read daily. There's a lot of content coming in there, so I need to go dig deeper as well as your source, right? It's OmniTalk. It's finding the source of pulling a lot of that content together that's filtered. That's not just coming from sponsored by a vendor, a SaaS provider. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. Oh, here are a couple more coming in. What does systematic data sharing look like for future shared inventory? Maybe hold inventory vendors may have some, transportation may have some as well. Gosh, Michael, that's a great question. The shared inventory is having visibility to that is going to be crucial. And I mentioned a little bit with that marketplace. It's going to be trying to get the marketplace a shared platform, because data coming across the platform really needs to be clean, right? You can have two different data sources, but if they don't have the same language, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to scrub that to speak the same language. Do I anticipate drop shippers and vendors holding that inventory and sharing that data back and forth? Absolutely. And that's a perfect marketplace. That's what we saw on small businesses doing that quite a bit throughout 2020. Hopefully that helped a little bit. I was trying to dance a little bit around some vendors at them. Do you have any advice for retailers looking to marketplaces for the first time to help identify what they should do to ready their supply chain for the additional demands of marketplace fulfillment? And that is a question that it goes back to that forecast. What kind of safety stock do you want to build into it? Do you have real-time visibility of that data as well? Having the forthright, the openness to share that data from the vendor to the marketplace provider, I think is crucial. The Speaking the same language, yet wanting to be proprietary with that as well, is something that you really just need to be important to recognize. Trying to catch another question here. The retailers the retailers in the marketplace, they really, either you have to supply separate inventory to start off with to find out what that forecast, that demand is going to be, and or come up with a contingency plan of how quickly can you react, how quickly is your supply chain, your vendors, your fulfillment bringing that inventory in as well. And I'd love to have more conversation with you. I know you guys have talked a lot about marketplace. I've seen a lot of information right now about marketplace being that trend coming forward. And what I keep coming back to is, and seeing and reading, is everybody's like, yep, just throw it all together. And the data, I think there's going to be a lot of failures there. Of course, failure by fire, right? Jump in there and give it a shot. But that data piece, that if you don't have clean identification of who owns that inventory, whether it's going to be through a dedicated barcode, SKU numbers, etc., you have to be really resilient on getting your forecast right, and what's the service level and or safety stock that you want to hold for each of that as you're developing your profiles and forecasts. All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody very much for joining today. I know it's very different than the traditional retail innovation, that there's a lot of great content out there. If you missed it in the beginning, there is a YouTube channel that's going to be held by Retail Innovation Week that they will, I'd recommend go out there, subscribe to it, click that bell so that you can get notified when they start posting all of the content out there from Retail Innovation Week 2021 onto that channel. So you can catch a lot of those great other speakers. There were some super ones here of activating the role of the store today. So I really do appreciate joining me today. And thank you very much. And please connect with me on LinkedIn.